And then we will continue our presentation and we'll move to the next presentation. So in the morning, we talked a lot about the projects and their experiences and the experts, measures. And so it's not true just in Korea, but also globally. There are many campaigns to reduce the pesticides globally. So the next presentation will be delivered by.
Next presenter is Dr. Tedes Amera. We were going to invite him here in person, but due to some circumstances, he couldn't make it. So we're going to play a video of his talk. Please watch.
The outline of my presentation will be background, Pan-International's work on HHPs, Pan-IPN shared principles on highly hazardous pesticides, IPN's work to phase out HHPs, IPN's overall goals, IPN's proposed 2020 outcomes, IPN's toxics-free SDGs projects. SDGs are Sustainable Development Goals. A global plan of action to phase out highly hazardous pesticides, what international venues are there to work on this, and the IPN and PAN proposed strategies to phase out HHPs. So when we are talking about highly hazardous pesticides, what are highly hazardous pesticides? These are pesticides that are acknowledged to present particularly high level of chronic hazards to health or environment. And these are also pesticides that appear to cause severe or reversible harm to health or the environment under conditions of use in a country. And considering this, WHO stated that exposure to highly hazardous pesticides is a major health concern. When we look at the impacts of highly hazardous pesticides, they constitute a small portion of globally registered pesticides, but they cause high disproportionate harm to human health and the environment. And this is well recorded and reported by UNEP. And according to UNEP in 2021, highly hazardous pesticides cause an estimated 385 million cases of unintentional pesticide poisoning every year. And likely it also causes it's linked to cancer, development disorder, and reproductive problems. And the WHO and the FAO in 2019 indicated that highly hazardous pesticides specifically contribute to declines in the population of birds, insects, amphibians, and aquatic communities. And they cause up to 1 in 5 in world suicides, and they are the cause for global human rights concern. And the continued use of HHPs undermines the attainment of several sustainable development goals. So this is highly linked to human rights abuse because workers' rights are not considered and farming communities' rights are not considered when HHPs are released or allowed for use. And some of the HHPs even are banned in some countries, but they are exported to developing countries for use. And this is a double standard which is going on, and this reflects the human rights concern in many human rights areas. And using these HHPs also undermines the achievement of sustainable development goals, especially in low and middle income countries and in countries with economies in transition. So some of the progresses to phase out HHPs, they are very well documented, and some UN agencies already indicated that with existing and new agroecological options, HHPs can be phased out from agriculture. And they are tested in different countries and even in developing countries, leave alone HHPs, even pesticides could be replaced by agroecological means. And banning highly hazardous pesticides from agriculture is cost effective. And there are countries that already implemented this without affecting agriculture productivity. And some of the experiences we have in Africa, for example, in Ethiopia, proved organic agriculture, even without using pesticides, can be cost effective and productive. And cutting also HHPs from some agricultural activities, for example, in the Ethiopian Rift Valley area, cutting HHPs from vegetable farming proved economically effective. WHO and FAO have issued also a call for action for detoxifying agriculture and health from highly hazardous pesticides. This is one progress so far, and UN human rights experts have also called for a worldwide phase out on use of highly hazardous pesticides. Moreover, in 2015, the fourth meeting of the International Conference on Chemicals Management recognized highly hazardous pesticides as an issue of international concern and calls for concerted action to address highly hazardous pesticides. With all these developments and progresses, however, according to UNEP, its report recently, it's observed that progress on highly hazardous pesticides has been uneven, and that concerted international actions are really urgently needed. As I indicated earlier, there is a very huge double standard where some of the highly hazardous pesticides are banned in countries, but those countries who banned these highly hazardous pesticides export for use in other countries. So based on this, Pan International has been working for long, and it developed a Pan International list of highly hazardous pesticides, and it is revised every year. This is a very useful document countries can use and can refer to their registered pesticides and can cross-reference which pesticides are highly hazardous pesticides and which are not, and to take into consideration also for future action. Not only this, Pan International also developed a consolidated list of banned pesticides, and these materials can be used as a reference in efforts to phase out HHPs nationally and also regionally. Using these two documents and the effort PAN and IPEN have been doing at the international arena and at grassroots level, PAN and IPEN developed shared principles which contains 10 principles. And the first principle is overarching objective, which focuses on phasing out of HHPs. And the second one is defining highly hazardous pesticides. What are highly hazardous pesticides? It consists of the definitions that I explained earlier. Replacing HHPs with agroecology is the third one. The fourth one is replacing HHPs with non-synthetic chemical alternatives, not only for agriculture, but for non-agriculture activities, agriculture uses, non-agriculture uses like vector control. Principle farmers and farm workers. Principle 6 is promoting children's health. Principle 7 is human rights. As I indicated earlier, allowing HHPs for use for farming workers and for the farming community is a human rights concern, because they have the right to live in a healthy environment, but HHPs really spoil human health and environment, not allowing people to live in a safe condition. Principle 8 is environmental contamination and impacts. Principle 9 is corporate accountability. And with Principle 10, PAN and IPN agreed to engage in the international processes like BRA, SICAM, and other international processes to work on phasing out HHPs. Based on this, IPN's also work continued, and this work is mainly focusing on, as per the agreement with PAN, on phasing out HHPs. And with this, IPN developed a global and regional strategy to phase out HHPs, and it has been supporting participating organizations to assess country situations in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, and to assess also agroecological techniques used by participating organizations as alternatives to highly hazardous pesticides. And we got lots of experiences from different countries which replaced highly hazardous pesticides and even other pesticides perfectly. And it has been supporting national policy initiatives that initiate the phase out of HHPs, because I will come later from the other institutions, UN institutions. The push that's coming is the list of HHPs should be developed by countries, and countries should have their own policies. So we are also working on assisting POs and national governments to develop, to initiate national policies to phase out HHPs. So the IPN's overall goals are, the first one is agroecology and non-chemical alternatives have successfully replaced highly hazardous pesticides, and HHPs are no longer a source of harm to human health and the environment in key crops and pests. This is the first overarching goal. And the second one is NGOs and social movements identify those pesticides that are highly hazardous under their ordinary conditions of use in the country, and are able to influence governments to establish and enforce legislations that prohibits their manufacture, import, sale, and use of HHPs. So these are the two main overall goals of IPN in working to phase out HHPs. So we had proposed 2020 outcomes because it was related to SICAM, the previous SICAM, which was supposed to end in 2020. But the process was delayed because of the pandemic, and we are still discussing on the beyond the 2020 process of SICAM. The main expected outcomes also before the beyond 2020 process was, the first one is at least 3 governments in each of 3 or more regions establish national lists of highly hazardous pesticides for phase out and elimination. The second one was international guidelines are adopted through the SICAM process or another UN affiliated agency for non-chemical alternatives to HHPs. And the third one was IPN and PAN in alliance with other NGOs or relevant institutions to provide assistance and knowledge to NGOs in at least 30 countries. So even if the beyond the 2020 process is going on and the IPN, the SICAM 2020 process was delayed, we still are working on this, and we are reaching many countries especially in the 3 UN regions, Africa, Asia, and Latin America, and we are supporting POs, and also we are engaged in the SICAM process so that the phasing out of HHPs can be considered as an important issue, because many governments at ICCM4 and before in the SICAM process agreed to phase out HHPs from countries. This is the example that we took from the support in Africa, in the 6 African countries. IPN continued this work, but The example from the 6 African countries country situation assessment is showing us how HHPs are really used in Africa. For example, Ethiopia and Tanzania, from the total registered pesticides, 58% each use highly hazardous pesticides. So 58% of the total registered pesticides in Tanzania and Ethiopia are highly hazardous pesticides. This is really very dangerous. If we see, for example, Kenya, it is 34%, and Mozambique, 19%, and Cameroon, 9.5%, and Zambia, 4%. So these are the small number of pesticides, but creating high impact on human health and the environment. So this is a picture from Africa, at least from the 4 countries of Africa, which can show us how HHPs are disseminated at African level. Based on this and other processes, we have been also trying to develop a global plan of action to phase out HHPs, and this was initiated at the FAO and WHO joint meeting for pesticide management, where IPN and PAN have observer status. The initiative was pushing to phase out HHPs from agriculture and to initiate a globally agreed list of HHPs. This process went very well in the discussions and in the development of texts and documents. However, it was watered down with the suggestion of FAO to leave the listing of HHPs to countries. We were advised just to leave the listing of HHPs for countries rather than taking this to bring it to an international level. And FAO refrained also from pushing the phasing out of HHPs from agriculture from the international level and just suggesting this can be done at national level. And the other thing which was emerged with regards to this, while we were fighting on this, we noted that an MOU of CropLife International and FAO was present to work together, and this, according to civil society, public interest civil society organizations, including PAN and IPN, this is a toxic alliance, and it created an opposition to the global at the global movement, and this was we stood against this alliance, and we are still fighting on this, and we thought that the effort that we have in phasing out HHPs is watered down even by a toxic alliance between CropLife International and FAO, and we are still working on this to at least lift this memorandum of understanding and to avoid this double standard of approaching the industry as an alliance rather than keeping the mandate and to be a balance for the international community and the agriculture community. This is a fight that's going on so far. The international venues that we are working, HHPs had been one of the issues of concern in cycle. And we have been trying a lot in developing alternatives and working with the national governments to have some regulations. The cycle beyond the 2020 IP4, the international process, the fourth meeting of international process, also endorsed HHPs in its resolution as a public health concern. It was conducted last August in Bucharest. And the issue is also under discussion within the joint meeting for pesticide management, where IPN and PAN have observer status. And there was a meeting in Rome last week. I was attending there. and we are still discussing on the issue of phasing out HHPs from agriculture. PAN, IPEN, Public Eye, the University of Cape Town, and the Center for Pesticide Suicide Prevention, which is based in the University of Edinburgh. We have also been discussing on how we can strengthen the effort of the public interest groups to establish the phasing out of HHPs from the world and to save the farming community. And there is also a dialogue going on at the SAICM University of Cape Town Community of Practice, and this is a regular discussion on HHPs, which is going on still now, and it has also produced some informative progresses in the discussion forum. The PAN and IPEN proposed a strategy to phase out HHPs. IPEN has an experience, especially in the lead paint elimination work. The lead paint elimination work was very effective because the US government, US EPA, WHO, and UNEP, together with the public interest NGO, which is IPEN, established a global alliance to phase out lead in paint. So there is a government pillar, there is a UN institution pillar, and also a public interest pillar. Industry was not there, but with these organizations working together, the industry endorsed the idea of phasing out of lead from paints. So now IPEN and the PAN and the other institutions are considering the establishment of global alliance to phase out HHPs, to use the lead paint model. And the alliance may incorporate UN agencies, FAO, WHO, UNEP, ILO, or others. And championing government, African governments are champions, but we can have also European governments who are really very keen to phase out HHPs from agriculture and also from other non-agriculture sectors. So this can be established that way, and public interest civil society organizations like PAN and IPEN or others can involve in this group and influence the industry to phase out HHPs. This is the current strategy that we are working on, and everyone is welcome. And if there are governments who are really trying and interested to be champion to support this process, they are really very welcome to this. And we are going to use all the processes, the international processes, so that we can achieve the phasing out of HHPs from agriculture sector. This is all what I have. Thank you really so much. Thank you.
So now that I listened to the presentation, one of the principles, shared principles number 5, 6, 7, 8, I think these are areas where we are running some projects, science-based projects, farm worker, children, and family member exposure. We did evaluation of these aspects. So this data will be very useful in applying these principles in the field. And 6 countries in Africa, the registered HHPs of them, the registered pesticides, how many of them, what percentage are HHPs? So they actually counted. So in human body, of the pesticides detected in human body, what are the ones that can be classified as HHPs? We already did that study and we have the results. So this can be a very powerful evidence, I think. Moving on.
Next, we have the presenter in person with us today. So he's from PAN AP. So it's a very unfamiliar name to us, actually, because we couldn't be involved in those global activities so far. But PAN AP is a group that working with other countries, and this is Asia Pacific PAN, and he is Mr. Sarojini Ratnam from PAN AP Asia Pacific. Please welcome her.
Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you to the organizers for inviting me here. It's been a pleasure to be here to, to be talking about the issues that PAN has been working on for many years. And in particular, also in terms of, myself working in this area for many years. So it's a pleasure to be here. So I would like to thank the organizers. Before I start, I just wanted to also share who we are. And we have a small introduction and you heard from Tadesse and some of partners here. But PAN Asia Pacific, we are one of the regional centers of Pesticide Action Network International. There are 5 centers, and the Asia Pacific is based in Penang, Malaysia, and we have an office also in Manila in Philippines. And what we have been kind of working as a network is really to eliminate the harm upon humans and the environment by pesticide use, and to the promotion of agroecology, or what we call biodiversity-based ecological agriculture, to be very specific. And our vision is a society that is truly democratic and culturally diverse, based on social and gender justice, fair distribution of productive resources, and environmental safety and sustainability. So it's a big goal, but that's our vision. And we have as a core our community empowerment, and which is really for us social change. And PAN has developed these strong partnerships with movements of peasants, agricultural workers, indigenous peoples, fisher folk, rural women, and other small fruit producers throughout the Asia Pacific region. And I wanted to emphasize, because the movements and the people on the ground actually have pushed us into areas that are quite important for them. So suddenly you will be hearing about PAN AP's gender empowerment. We work with women's organizations and pushing for equality and rights and protection. We also have been taking on the issue of peasants, which is no land, no life, the land grabbing that is taking place. So, but our core is still pesticides. We want the elimination of the harm caused by pesticides, and to support agroecology. If you ask me, can we feed the world without pesticides? I will say yes, we can, because it is possible, and the farmers are committed to feed us. We have to give the opportunity, we have to give the support, the financial and technical support, and I think it's possible. We've never had that possibility in the past, but I think we can now. So I was told to talk about the PANIP and PAN campaigns, and I just want to emphasize this, which Tadesse basically also shared earlier on. The UN human rights experts call highly hazardous pesticides a global human right concern, because the catastrophic impact on the environment, human health, and society as a whole. And this is not only the special rapporteurs, it's the UN Human Rights Council. We've had a feedback from the UNEP, very strong commitments, and we had from FAO, which is, as you heard from earlier on, is moving backwards, and I'll explain why. Why are they not as committed to eliminate pesticides as before? And we'll know why. So we talked about 385 million cases of acute, unintentional acute pesticide poisonings each year. This was done because we were so frustrated with the WHO, which in 1991 said 25 million cases of pesticide poisoning, and they stopped. There was never an update, and we are talking about 30 years of no update. So some of the scientists from PAN, AP, Germany, North America sat together for 2 years looking at all the documents and saying we need to come out with a figure based on science, based on existing evidence of scientific studies and community monitoring, and they pull this, and now we have this number, which is shocking. From 25 million, we have a jump of 385 million. And this is, for me, still a tip of the iceberg, because there are many, many cases, and so which have not been reported. Because if you're a poor farmer in the rural area or a worker in the oil palm plantation, you're not going to report that you're suffering a pesticide poisoning incident, because there's no possibility, no monitoring, no hospitals nearby, no public health facilities. So this is really, for me, a tip of an iceberg. Moving on, and in terms of the impact on the environment, we always find it easier to talk about environment than human poisonings, because it's the way that the whole kind of the politics has been developed. But we also wanted to emphasize that the use of pesticides has been linked to degradation of biodiversity and ecosystems, and this is a global assessment report on biodiversity and ecosystems, and there are discussions about including it in the CBD. There's a lot of countries that are opposing it, and we know who they are, but we are still trying to push the reduction of pesticides within the CBD. Let's see. The use of HHPs has also contributed to declines in the populations of birds, insects, amphibians, and aquatic communities. This is FAO, WHO, many other scientific studies that actually have shown the decrease, not only of biodiversity, but also of the insect and other populations of animals. And here, you heard from Tadesse, who eloquently talked about how the continued use of HHPs undermines the attainment of several SDGs. Moving on. So these are some of the, I put it all in one big slide, but I will go into some of it. Some of it you've heard from Tadesse, so he's, focused on some of this, so I won't go into depth. But I wanted to share with you, first of all, the documentation of pesticide use and community monitoring. So I think Hai mentioned it earlier in the morning about CPAM, and I'll touch on that a little bit. Some of the policy advocacy work, maybe at the regional level rather than the others which Tadesse mentioned, and some work in UNEP, UNIA, which is the United Nations Environment Assembly. So we'll focus on that, and the bulk of my focus will be on the campaigns. And I really want to share this because would like to have more support from the region for these campaigns on highly hazardous pesticides. So moving on, Okay, so this is an effort to eliminate the use. And one of the key elements why we talked about community monitoring, or someone talked about community science, we really wanted the community's participation to document the impact of pesticides on on their health and the environment, to document the how it is being used. You saw all the many photos of exposure, and how, a lot of communities in Asia, in agriculture, do not use PPE. So that's the reality on the ground, and every year it's not changing. So you wonder what's happening with all the so-called, support at the UN level, pushing for this reduction of the highly hazardous pesticides. But we felt that this community monitoring is very important, so that the community then takes action, whether if it is in a country where it's difficult to go and protest, like in the Philippines. If you can't do that, then move towards alternatives, agroecology, talk about sustainable agriculture, organic agriculture, and still you're moving away from pesticides. And in other countries like India and the Philippines, you can actually go and make a demand in front of the ministries or the your local government office, so that's possible. So it's how you document, and how that documentation then is used for campaigning, policy advocacy, and moving away from pesticides to agroecology. It's a process, and it's quite important that the community is involved, and also linking up with the movements, the people's movements, are very strong in many parts of Asia, linking with them, because they are also working and aligned with some of the vision that you are having. So those, I think, is what we thought would be very important when you talk about community empowerment through community-based pesticide monitoring. Okay, and these are the steps. So you identify the problem, you undertake a needs assessment for a training workshop, you tailor the workshop to the needs of the group. If they are workers, then you're talking to plantation workers. You make your workshop fit into their concerns, their problems, and how we can work together. Then you would have training of CPAM facilitators, and that is quite interesting, because when we were under pandemic and we had to do a CPAM monitoring documentation on the ground, and Tui just called the CPAM facilitators in Hi-Ho and said, can you do this for us? We'll send you, and they had a Zoom meeting, and they were able to do it. So those are some of the ways in which once you have CPAM facilitators, it's possible. If you don't have, then it's difficult, because at that time nobody could travel to the commune or the community, and so this is what we talked about in terms of CPAM facilitators. Then training of key farmers. So it's not just people at the community who who have a role like students, but also farmers themselves. And here I think we find that the women farmers are more often more enthusiastic to be facilitators. Then you do the CPAM surveys, you input into a web-based app which is available, then the data is analyzed and a report is written, and then the feedback results to the community, because we don't want to be like some researchers who go in, take out the information, and then they have their PhD or something, but nothing goes back to the community. So that is a very important aspect of CPAM. and then use the monitoring results for action and campaign. And and this is what we have. We have the reports, but we are also thinking of, we use the documentation for other purposes as well, for UN policy. We put it into smaller documentation for country level, and it's available on our website. So there's a QR code, I think, which I shared. So I'll just put it here in case you want to have a look at it. And then we have, oh, sorry, where did I put the, where did I, oh, here, sorry. Okay, moving on. Okay, then what are the urgent action needed to phase out HHPs? One, we've realized that in many countries, there's a failure to manage pesticides in terms of at the national level. And it could be because many countries don't have the resources. Knowing some of the toxicologists who work in the Ministry of Agriculture or Health or Environment, they don't have time. Sometimes, the industry will give you, this chunk of data to go through for one pesticide. So sometimes they just look at the summary. So, and often the summary does not reflect what's happening in the rest of the document. So that could be one problem. The other is we've got pesticides that are banned, but they are still available, and so what do you do? I think in all the studies this morning we saw banned pesticides still being available. There's also like breakdown substances, so they're still being used in the countries. So there's a failure. And the other is the pesticide industry is very strong. Let's not kid ourselves. It's supported by all their countries. Like, for example, in Thailand, when they wanted to ban glyphosate, paraquat chlorpyrifos, the US ambassador went and talked to the Ministry of Agriculture and said, you can't do this. This is going to affect, our economy. And so it was openly being done. And the industry comes in very strong and say, there's no information that glyphosate is bad. The one that IAC did, the International Agency on the Research on Cancer, which is a UN body, they have limited information or something, so they come back very, very strong. And so let's not kid ourselves. The industry is very strong. So how do we then work together as a people's movement, as NGOs, as CSOs, to strengthen ourselves? Because if not, they have more influence, as you can see. So Thailand, in fact, had to rescind the ban. But finally, they went ahead with paraquat and chlorpyrifos. But glyphosate is still in question. And so even in the EU, there's a lot of problems because they are still using glyphosate. So let's not always see in a way how do we then work around this corporate influence. So how do we challenge corporate influence is my thing. And what FAO and CropLife Toxic Alliance, now CropLife is an association of the big agrochemical TNCs. They're big. You're talking about Bayer, you're talking about Syngenta, you're talking about, what's the other one? Corteva, which is a merger of Dow and DuPont. So these are big companies. And so for FAO to have alliance with these CropLife is dangerous. And that's one of the reasons why their global plan of action on highly hazardous pesticide, they wanted to eliminate highly hazardous pesticides from agriculture by 2030. It never pushed through. Why? because you have industry backing, you know, and we know that one of the assistant director generals of FAO used to be the lawyer for some of this pesticide industry. And the, you know, so you see the revolving door. But we are putting pressure. If you can't go straight hit them, you have to look for other ways to, you know, continue your campaign. And so we are continuing the campaign, but we are also mindful that there are some forces within FAO that we have to be careful and cautious and see how we can go ahead with the campaign. Anyway, just to let you know. And this is some of the farmers who have supported us, you know, to say stop FAO Crop Life Toxic Alliance. And it's not just the FAO. If you look at the GPS, the Global Summit on Food that was from the UN, it had people like, what's his name, the Microsoft, Bill Gates. There was Bill Gates there. There was AGRA, which is the Africa's Green Revolution for Africa. So Alliance for the Green Revolution for Africa. They were pushing pesticides, fertilizers, GMOs, and they were the key people who were in that UN summit. And so you see that, and then they also invited the big corporations to be there. So you can see that there is a corporate capture of the UN. And so we have to expose, we have to make sure that we understand what's happening, that sometimes this, the instructions that are coming from certain UN bodies may not be from the aspect of people's human rights or people's rights to the environment or, you know, human health, you know. So we have to also understand the bigger picture, the politics at the global level. Anyway, so moving on, we also started to work with the issue of double standards. This was PAN Germany that started the project. And what they found was that Germany exported 9 pesticides which are not approved for use in the EU, including the pesticides cyanamide, acetochlor, and tepraloxidin. And then they also found that so many tons, 59,616 tons of pesticide ingredients were exported. And some of this were listed as carcinogenic and toxic to reproductive organs. And in another study by Public Eye, they found 51 of the 120 pesticide active ingredients in Syngenta's portfolio are not authorized for use in Switzerland. So you can see that there is double standards. And so now there is a commitment from the EU that they will try to deal with double standards, that they want to ban pesticides, ban in their countries, ban in the EU, and that it should not be allowed to be exported elsewhere. And so, but unfortunately, because when they were looking at next year's plan of action, they said, oh, we don't have time to do this, so they've postponed it to 2024. But there is now pressure from many CSOs, including PAN, to ask the Minister of Agriculture and the other ministries in Germany to stop this double standard. So come out with laws that could be a front runner for EU overall, but start with Germany. So we did a signature campaign. So next time we will send it to this group. So you can support us as well. But yes, so there were about 200, if I'm not mistaken, 267 groups that signed with big networks as well. And we submitted it to the German minister. Okay, so because of the community action, what we said, CPAM, we have had some series of bans of pesticides in Vietnam, Malaysia, India, and Sri Lanka. But it's a long struggle. The Malaysia one, I was talking about Hatijah and Zul. It was really paraquat. It took forever. I think Cap worked on it in the beginning, Pan, Tenaganita, Sam, everyone was pushing for the ban of paraquat because it was one of the most toxic pesticides, and it was recently banned completely. So we are hoping that it's not available still in the market, because you can ban, but it can still come in. So that's one. But Vietnam, I think a lot of it was because of CGFED and some of the information that we fed to the local to the national government. Anyway, so CPAM documentation actually helped communities to identify the problems and the actions, and they took action. And so there's community organizing as a result, and community actions for advocacy. And I think, the IDIS example is also, I mean, we were so surprised. There were 5,000 people on the protesting in the aerial spray, banning of aerial spraying in Mindanao. And they even went to the, the plane runway to stop the plane taking off. So that kind of strong actions, So you can see that that is actually very possible. And so the other aspect I wanted to share was advancing agroecology. For me, I just came back from India, from this agroecology center in the middle of Kerala, and really rural, and they had 300 varieties of rice that they were growing out, mainly from India, because a lot of it is lost except in certain seed banks. And they're sharing this. They have an organic shop where they even have rice that improves lactation. So the mothers are coming to buy, and so it's amazing some of the work in terms of rice biodiversity, but also in terms of I don't know how many varieties of okra, of brinjal, of different coffee beans. They had papaya, banana, everything. And it was really zero waste. Nothing was wasted. Everything was either composted or fed back into the land, to the crops, So amazing work that they are doing. And I feel that with advancing agroecology, we can move forward. We need to move forward and move away from pesticides. People say, oh, you talk about how can agriculture be there without pesticides? And I think that we're not talking about short term. Pesticides came in because there was a big push. There was funds, there was aid, there was, seeds and pesticides and fertilizers that were produced and given free to the farmers at that time. So we need that kind of change for agroecology. We really need to advance agroecology, but farmers are already doing it on the ground, and others want to find a way forward. And some of the farmers are actually in India. Oh, where is my, okay, anyway. So this is a campaign, what we call Protect Our Children from Toxic Pesticides. This campaign came about because we found that there's child labor. There's family, in family farms, children are also working in the agriculture. They're spraying pesticides. They are being exposed. And so if you look at the UNICEF data, 108 million children are in agriculture. So 108 million children are working in agriculture. setting, and most of them are exposed to pesticides. So we said we have to take action. We have to have this awareness campaign on protecting our children from pesticides. And so we have, ongoing activities, but also some activities on June 5. So you have Devi there, Rosanna Devi, trying to do some radio show. Then we have the cyclists from India, small kids, with a message, and CGFED in terms of their competition, children's competition. And this was our poster for this year: uphold children's rights to a healthy pesticide-free world. And the other says ban toxic pesticides, agroecology for our future now. And we will be having sessions of sharing from January 4 to 6 under the Oxford Real Farming Conference, where you'll see children sharing this experience, but also other aspects of the work on agroecology and the reduction of pesticides. So I'll try to finish this very fast. I think I've got a few more. I'm okay with the time, I guess. Okay. The Yavatmal scandal I just wanted to share is where this is in India, and we had 80 farmers and farm workers who died because of polo or diethylfuran. And this polo is the brand name of Syngenta product. There's a court case going on in Switzerland, first time. It was the work, a lot of it was Pan-India actually. Pan-AP was supporting, Public Eye, and ECCHR wrote all the legal documents to push this in the courts, but also in terms of the OECD process, where you can make the OECD company accountable. So it didn't go very far, but we tried our best. So the court case is still ongoing, and we are still looking at how the support for the 51 victims can still go on. But what they've done is they have organized themselves as the Maharashtra Association of Pesticide Poisoned Persons. And that's itself a success, because all these Yavatmal farmers have come together, and now they have this, and they're now putting pressure on Syngenta to change, as well as pushing the Indian government to do something about polo, and to ban polo, or to remove it from the market. So let's see what happens. This one, I just wanted to share, because the plantation workers campaign for a safe working environment is really, we find that PPE either is not available or it's too hot. I think Dr. Yoon was talking about how he tried on the PPE and it was so hot. And that's the situation. I mean, if Korea is hot, can you imagine in Malaysia and Indonesia? and they spray, 8 hours in the hot sun without stop. And they start from 7 in the morning to 3 p.m. And can you imagine the heat at 1, the humidity at 12, 1, 2, 3. It's crazy. So they cannot use it. And so we have been pushing this FAO code. This is the International Code of Conduct on Pesticide Management, which says that if it requires PPE, then don't use the pesticide. Simple as that, because especially in developing countries. So anyway, that's, I think, one of the difficulties. And so we've been trying to work with groups, trade unions, that are organizing workers, especially the focus right now is really oil palm, but we're also thinking of banana, agricultural plantation workers, because they're exposed to a lot of pesticides. Anyway, so that's one of the things that we will be focusing, and have been focusing, but will continue to focus. This is also the campaign I mentioned from Mindanao, campaign to stop aerial spraying. And then a way forward, I think Tadise talked about an alliance. So we are looking at a global phase out and ban of HHP. So we are not quite sure. We are still in the discussion period. We tried to do it once, but it didn't quite. It was actually quite, at that time, FAA wanted to have a global plan of action to phase out HHPs. But because of the Toxic Alliance, that didn't quite push through. But now as CSOs, we are looking at the alliance possibility, which, you know, Joe and our friend in Bjorn and who's the other one? Yes. So we all worked together, and Mariel and I and all that. We had this idea of this alliance on phase out of HHPs. So let's see whether this will push again. So we are working on moving that forward. And the specific target is 2030, the use of highly hazardous pesticides. And then I think the last one is protecting the health and environment of small food producers and their communities as well as consumers. So moving forward in terms of livelihoods with agroecology. I just wanted to share this photo because I'm very proud of this photo. These are women from Tamil Nadu. I think they're at the border of Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. They fought for more than 10 years to get land titles as Dalits who are very, I wouldn't like to say that. It's like they're socially excluded under the Indian caste system. So they're excluded, and they took a long time, almost 10 years of really petitioning, protesting, and et cetera, and they got the land title. And 10 of the women decided to put the land together and do organic farming. They have many challenges because the land that was given to them was very stony. So they had to take out the stone. This is a lot of things. But anyway, they managed to eke a living, a livelihood, and that now they're selling organic vegetables and other grains. Okay, I'll stop here and say thank you. This is our contact details. Please contact us, and thank you.
네.
For this conference, we invited experts and people from the government, and we wanted to have any persons from the corporations, but we decided not to because the perspective that we are trying to say here doesn't align with the interest of the companies, and I think that was a very good choice for us not to invite the people from the companies. So you heard about many campaigns and good documentation, so that the documentation can be utilized for good purposes, and she brought many pamphlets so that we can share. So, but I'd like to keep them so that NGOs in Korea can share them on ourselves. And next we will move to NGOs in so in the morning so far we talked about the NGOs in Asia, and then we heard expert opinions, and then went up to international level to share the current status. And the most important one is ultimately, we'd like to have sustainable agriculture. That is our end goal. And what is important is how we put that into practice. So one party in that regard is Hansalim. And then Hansalim is at the forefront of organic farming. And we invited one person, Mr. Lee from Hansalim. So we invited the producer in Hansalim. So he is one of those persons who are working on site, and we'd like to share his experience. Thank you.
In Southeast Asia, this fruit, pear, you don't have it in your countries, I think. So I am producing pear, the fruit, very common fruit in Korea. And the cultivation area is about 26,000 square meters. Annual production volume is about 100 tons per year. In 2003, in Korea, when they were promoting the eco-friendly certification, I have received that certification. And in 2013, I have received the Hansalim autonomous certification I got. And in 2019, pesticide-free certification I have achieved since 2019. And this year, 2022, transitional organic farming phase I am in today. So in the field, now that I listen to you, I have fought a war against the pesticides. I also have to fight against the pests and diseases, and I also have to sell my products to consumers. So I have to juggle between these different duties of mine. So since 2013, when I started the eco-friendly farming in certification, when I started farming, spraying pesticide, whenever I spray pesticide, I felt something's not right. Something was not good. When I spray pesticide, the germs and pests will die, and that mechanism will obviously impact human body as well. So when I do pest control over this wide area, it took 6 hours for me using speed sprayer. So at that time, there was a cabin on the top. The person is exposed outside. So in that mode, I did spraying for 6 hours. And during that time, I hated the fact that I keep breathing in the pesticide aerosol. I hated that. So this machine I purchased immediately. When I purchased this machine, I didn't buy it because I had a lot of money. Because I have to do farming for 50 more years, I was going to make an investment. So I bought this 17 years ago. I'm still using it just fine. Very useful. And when I use this spray, the pesticides, we dilute it with water, and the original solution sometimes hits my throat, respiratory tract. I feel it. I hated that, so I bought anti-dust mask. When I mix pesticides, I always keep my anti-dust mask on when I'm working in the field. So 6 times a year, after 2-3 years since I started farming, 6 times of pest control I did per year. So there are about 7,000 farms of producing pear. Of them, more than 7,000, they are doing pest control more than 20 times per year. So when I talk about 6 times of pest control in the year, you have to agonize, and you have to think about a lot of things. The Hansalim is also recommending 6 times of pest control per year. If you want to do that, you have to observe how the germs appear. And the insects are breaking out of egg. They grow up and they lay eggs. You observe that process, and using minimum quantity of pesticide, you want to create maximum effect. So I keep thinking about how I can do that best. So this is a process. This is the kind of war I wage in the field. So starting in 2004, I continued to do 6 times of pest control, but then in 2016 I changed to pesticide-free farming. So I started pesticide-free in 2013. The reason I could do that is because personally I hated pesticide personally. At the same time, I made all these observations. I tried to control the pests and germs. And that process and efforts were appreciated by my consumers. That's what brought me this far as a producer. So in that process, I always invite 100 or 200 consumers to my farm and do a party for them. So based on that's proof of my belief that I want to provide the best and most safe product to my consumers. That has been my motivation. And in the process, Hansalim Co-op I came to encounter, which was a very big luck for me. And thanks to them, I had another chance to make a challenge of going pesticide-free. So in the field, when I do eco-friendly farming, pesticide-free farming, the biggest challenge for me was this. To give an example, for instance, in pear farming, there are key pests. For instance, pear tree insect. For instance, this is a pest. To control that insect, to reduce its population, it breaks out of the egg, and when it becomes an adult body, before they lay egg, then before that I have to control them. Otherwise, too late. So in February, day temperature is over 6 Celsius degree and for 6 consecutive days, and then I start the pest control. If you miss that timing afterwards, the synthetic pesticide 3 times, 4 times, 5 times you spray, you still cannot control this pest. So to do eco-friendly farming and to avoid using the pesticide in too much quantity, you have to do the pest control at the right timing. Timing is very important. You also always have to observe whether the insects have broken out of the egg or not, hatched or not, and then whether they have laid their eggs or not. So you always have to observe. Well, it really depends. You have to have the right information about your own field, and you have to get information and data from the government agencies and research institutes. It's a learning curve. And when I went pesticide-free farming, we had the Ministry of Agriculture speaker. So in Korea at the moment, organic farming materials are selected by the government agency and which are recommended to the farmers. About those materials, the pest control testing it's not been proven in the field. So when I do the farming, I use those materials. Well, the materials are not very effective, and sometimes it causes harm to the crops in reality. So you have to test these products and materials yourself in working in the field. You identify potential issues and address them and reapply and repeat. So there are 7,000 farms in Korea, and of them 3,500 of them do more than 20 times of pest control per year. And pesticide-free farming farmers are 70 farms, almost 1 out of 100,000, very small number. So in early 2000, in Korea, when the Korean government was nurturing the eco-friendly farming, organic farming, about 100 farms made an attempt of this, but the number dropped to 30 farms 5-6 years ago. Now it's gone up slightly now. It's gone down to 30 farms. Why? Because these farms became very economically challenged, so they could not make the economical sense, so they just had to give up. And sadly, some of those early pioneers, they passed away quite early because this was uncharted territory, so they suffered a lot. So a lot of them actually passed away quite early, which was unfortunate. And when I am involved in the organic farming, trying not to use pesticides, I still have to have a lot of learning to do. Sometimes I feel, well, organic farming is not a way for me. So what I'm saying is that this is not an easy job. Why? Because so to control the germs, if you use pesticides, because pesticides will penetrate into the plant to control the insect. So if you use pesticide, the pest control is effective for 10 days. After one round of spraying, whatever humidity condition it is, it will be effective. But our natural material-based chemicals that we are using in organic farming is not as penetrating as the other normal pesticides. And if we try to avoid the damage to the plants, it will not be as effective for longer periods. So if it rains quite often, then we will have to do more rounds of spraying. So organic farms are in a very difficult situation now, and a lot of them actually end up doing more rounds of spraying. And insecticides to make it more effective between 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. or midnight to 3 a.m. You aim for the highest humidity time window. If it dries up too fast, then it's difficult to do pest control. So you spray that at maximum humidity. So this is how we control the insects. And the germs, bacteria, we anticipate when it's going to rain. We use natural sterilizers after rain and so on. This is how we control the fungus. And in the process, what I've realized is important is I make all these efforts for pest control, but the insects and bacteria you can control, but the crops are not growing healthy. I get that impression looking at my plants. So more healthier soils and to make healthier trees. The food for the soil, which are microorganisms, I feed the soil with the rich microorganisms. So it's a circle, so runs around and around. So you take timber from the woods, and then there was some wood waste that comes from that lumbering. So I fed the soil with 150 tons of this waste wood for some years, and then the soil became very rich, and the trees were growing much better, and the pest control was also more effective. And in 2019, I started pesticide free. I suffered a lot for the last 3 years, but this year I usually produce 10 tons. That's my normal level, but then now I'm up to 85 tons. So some good progress I'm making here, I think. The reason I could come this far is not because I did everything right myself. In early 2000, this organic farming, which was uncharted territory, there were other pioneers who walked on this path before me. Based on their knowledge and wisdom, I could reap some success. There were other supports from colleagues and so on, and policies as well. And then Hansalim Co-op helped me market my products. I met this consumer organization, so I had this very stable supply network where I could sell my products. All those factors made it possible, I think. So I always consider soil very important. So I always make sure I feed the soil with whatever is necessary, or with organic materials. So organic content is up to 50%. So the organic farming pioneers, if it's over 5%, then you can do organic farming. That's what they say. So I think I am at that level now with 5%. And this may be limited to agriculture, but if you want to minimize the pesticide that you use, you have to do the right design so that to make sure your crops, your plants grow properly. Sometimes it rains more, sometimes the temperature is higher, sometimes the nutrition that you gave to your plants are overly absorbed. So the trees go through that the normal growth stage in its life stages. So if that cycle is not followed, then their immune system is also off. That makes them more vulnerable to insects. Well, other farms nearby are not having this insect pest, whereas I am affected. So that shows it's not growing normally. So I look at the growth, length of and color of the leaf of the tree to see whether it is growing normally or not. When it's not growing normally, to make it grow normally again, using natural materials, agriculture should, and the Ministry of Agriculture should offer the right technology for this. This is what our farms need a lot. The people in organic farming are also studying this a lot. So they are actually the ones that are leading the development of organic farming in Korea, the farmers themselves. And in closing, what I want to share with you is that, like I said earlier, of the 7,000 farms, 70% of them are going organic. The reason is because there has been a lot of interest and support from the government agencies, and scientific data has been exposed as well. So due to such information, I was greatly helped by those data and information. So I expect the government and research institutes to continue with that science and data. And what's even more important is our consumers who applaud our efforts. That they brought me here today. Thank you very much.
And next presentation. So far we heard a lot of presentations on from the government official, the producers, the experts, and the campaign activists about the achievements and challenges. So we want to have time to discuss all the information that we have received, and then we invite Dr. Jo, the ex-senior science and technology advisor at IPN. Please welcome him.
I would like to provide some brief thoughts about this most recent pesticide study in Southeast Asia. And I would like to begin by thanking the NGOs who worked on this study. So special thanks to CAP in Malaysia, to IDIS in the Philippines, CCI and CGFED in Vietnam, and Wonjin Institute here in Korea. And a special thank you to Wonjin for organizing this meeting and to KFIF for their financial support. I would like to talk about 3 topics that are present in the report, and these are categories of types of pesticides. So here they are, and let's begin with the first one, the nationally banned pesticides. Now, nationally banned pesticides were found in all 3 countries, and they were found in all 3 types of samples. So they were found in crops, in house dust, and even in people sampling urine. And these names are very familiar to NGO colleagues, and really, we should not be finding any of these substances in any of these samples. So why did we find them? Well, it depends on the sample, but if you find pesticides on crops, it means they're being used in the country. And if you find it in dust, persistence is another possible explanation. DDT, for example, can last for decades in soil, so we're not sure whether this reflects current use. However, the study sampled different types of media, so if you find it in urine, it means current use. So the chlorpyrifos in Vietnam in house dust probably is due to current use. And in house dust, actually, all of those pesticides have some degree of persistence. Now, what do NGOs do about this? This is not the first time this has happened. Well, regulators typically cannot respond to an NGO study and then ban a substance. However, they can be invited by the NGO to confirm the results of the study. And this can also add to the credibility of the NGO study because they will find the same thing. Second, you can support government efforts for enforcement. This can take place in a variety of ways. And finally, we can do something that often government ministries are shy about doing, which is to give the pesticide industry and the plantations a push. Many pesticide industry representatives have told me we always obey all national laws. Well, that's very good. So that means that the pesticide industry should make a statement that these substances should not be used because they are banned. They should say that. Okay, let's move now to pesticides that are banned or not approved in the European Union. So the study actually found many of these, and they found them in all 3 types of crop samples. So here in crops, about half of them, in house dust, a little more than half, and in urine in people, the metabolites correspond to pesticides, and about 3/4 of those are not approved or are banned in the European Union. So why should we care about this? The EU is far away. It's a different government. It's has a different system. It's not our system. Why should we even care about it? Well, let's look at an example of one pesticide to give some clues about why we should care about it. And that's this substance, very widely used in these 3 countries and actually widely used around the world. And let's take a closer look. Well, here are some of the characteristics of malathion. And you can see this is a very serious collection of effects on human health and the environment. Now, the EU banned this substance, but in the EU, there is infrastructure. The EU has infrastructure for personal protection equipment. The EU has infrastructure for farmer outreach. The EU can translate among all the languages in the EU. They have infrastructure for waste management. But despite all of that infrastructure, they decided this was too dangerous to use. So other developed countries should pay attention to that. And countries that do not have that kind of infrastructure should not be using them. It's a clue. Even with all of their infrastructure, they said this cannot be used safely. So that's one of the reasons. Now, another question is, where did these substances banned in the EU come from? And one possibility is they came from the EU. Now, maybe you're wondering, how could that be true? You just told me that they are banned. Well, here is how this works. The EU can ban a substance, but it allows companies to still manufacture the substance as long as that substance is exported to a country outside the EU. And then we can come and find it in crops and in house dust and in people. Now, so this also prompts another question. Did the EU ever export any banned pesticides to Malaysia, Philippines, or Vietnam? And the answer is yes. Yes, they did. This is data from 2020. And wow, look at all those banned pesticides that were exported to Malaysia, Philippines, and Vietnam. And how many of these pesticides are highly hazardous pesticides? Okay, let's have a look. Wow, look at all those highly hazardous pesticides. Now, how many of these substances, the current study did not find all of these substances in the samples. So of these pesticides, which ones were found in the current study? So here they are. And you can see, first of all, that it is dominated by highly hazardous pesticides. And then this makes another question. Were these substances exported from the EU to these countries? Is that why we found them in the study? Not necessarily. This is data from 2020. It's the most recent data that is available. However, we can say with complete certainty that in 2020, all of these substances were exported from the EU to these three countries. And in fact, the bigger list is even more important list. All of them were exported to these countries. Now, you might be wondering, why do companies do this? They know these substances are dangerous. That's why the EU banned them. So our colleagues at Public Eye in Switzerland wrote to the chemical companies, the pesticide companies in the EU, and they asked them, why do you do this? So here are their answers. So we have some excuses. First excuse, our products are safe. If they are safe, why did the EU ban them? For health and safety reasons. Second excuse, we respect the laws. If there's no law banning your pesticide, it is very easy to respect that law. Third excuse, each country has a sovereign right. They also have a sovereign right to ban your pesticide. And finally, this one, which is one of my favorites, before the substance was banned in the EU, they never said anything about the vastly different conditions in other places. So those are the excuses of the industry. And this has become a big political issue in the European Union. And this report from the European Parliament actually recommends to stop doing this. So for the colleagues in these three countries, maybe you thought you were collecting important national information, but now if you want, you can be part of an international scandal and campaign. And so NGOs have done a variety of things about this. The first thing, obviously, is to publicize this issue of conditions of use. Even developed countries should be taking note when a country bans something for health and safety reasons. But if you do not have the infrastructure of the EU, you just simply cannot have an excuse for continuing to use it. And the second thing is there's actually a business disadvantage to using a substance banned in the EU if you have any interest in a market that has 27 countries, because the residue of that pesticide will be there, and it just simply makes no business sense if you want to capture that market to use a substance that is banned. And finally, you can advocate that the EU stop doing this hypocritical practice. They should not allow their companies to export their problems to other countries. It's just simply not ethical. So let's look at the final category, highly hazardous pesticides. Many people have talked about these substances today. And the study found that almost half of the pesticides that were detected are highly hazardous pesticides. And that is a very astonishing, surprising proportion, actually. And it is sort of a warning to everyone about how how agriculture needs to be changed. Now, several colleagues, I'm pleased, mentioned this peer-reviewed study, and this study looked at the fact that truly pesticide poisoning is a public health crisis. Globally, we have this very large number, and note that this is only acute poisoning. It does not include cancer. It does not include other diseases that happen later on over time. This is just the immediate effect. And as colleagues mentioned, this happens to almost half of all farmers globally. Now, how many pesticide poisonings were there in Southeast Asia, since the study deals with countries in Southeast Asia? In Southeast Asia, more than 52 million people every year have acute pesticide poisoning. Now, if 52 million people in Southeast Asia got sick from taking Tylenol, there would be a huge scandal. There would be government action to stop the harm. The company would be pressured to remove their product from the marketplace. There would be lawsuits. You would be reading about this in the newspaper. But each year in Southeast Asia, 52 million people are poisoned, and who says anything about it? It's really outrageous. And this is one of the reasons why highly hazardous pesticides are the worst ones. Now, I also wanted to say that, the focus often of regulators is the active ingredient of the pesticide. And of course, the highly hazardous pesticides have very toxic active ingredients. But we should also pay attention to this other category of the so-called inert ingredients. And why do I say that? Well, there's a language issue here. Normally in English, this word is an adjective, and it describes something that does not do anything. So people might think that an inert ingredient is like a filler, something that takes up space, does not do anything. But the definition of inert ingredient is kind of a legal definition, which means anything that is not the active ingredient. and if it's deliberately added. And US EPA supplies this helpful statement, and double negative in English means inert ingredients can be toxic. How toxic can they be? What toxic effects can they have? Oh, let's look. Oh, these are very serious toxic effects for human health and for animal species. How about other species? Environmental effects. Yes, it can affect fish and amphibians. What about the ability of inert ingredients to make the active ingredient more toxic? Yes, they can. They can even decrease the effectiveness of personal protection equipment and increase the harm to environment. And how much of the pesticide formulation do they make up? They can make up a huge portion of the pesticide formulation, and one of my favorites, companies usually claim them as a trade secret, so you do not even know what the formulation contains. So I wanted to mention this because when regulations are usually made about occupational exposure, it's to the active ingredient. And when regulations are made for residue limits, it's usually the active ingredient. But recently, PFAS substances, PFAS, were found widely in US pesticides, and those were part of the inert ingredients. And the one that they found is banned globally by the Stockholm Convention. So this is an important aspect of pesticides. Now, what should we do about highly hazardous pesticides? The answer is pretty clear, but let's get the opinion of a regulator. Okay, this is a very interesting report, and so the European Parliament says, depending on the industry, is a loser. The pesticide industry loves to regulate itself, and they said that doesn't work. You have to actually ban them. That's what works. So what can be done about this issue? Well, colleagues here are very well aware that the first thing is to publicize the results of the study. Everybody knows that. And of course, a reminder about the huge environmental and public health impact of these substances. And if there are any kind offers from the pesticide industry to regulate themselves, they should be rejected in favor of bans. Okay, so just a brief summary. The finding of nationally banned pesticides is another reminder about the need for enforcement, and anything that NGOs can do to support government efforts to enforce bans is very important. On the issue of the EU pesticides, banned or not approved in the EU, it's very important to pay attention to other countries' use of these substances if in a very high infrastructure place they are banned. And finally, this issue of export is an ethical issue that must be resolved, and you can play a role in that. And finally, the severe public health and environmental effects of highly hazardous pesticides really makes them a priority for bans. There are many of them in use. I'm saying this as if it is easy, and I know it's very difficult. Saro mentioned it, others have mentioned it. It's a very long, hard struggle, but really, that's what needs to be done. So thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to hearing the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
So now we are at the last part of the conference. So the foundation and then the institute have been supporting us all along, and then all the experts have helped us. And then one of them is Professor Peck from Seoul National University. Let's invite him.
I know I'm the last speaker to wrap up the meeting, and feel like don't have much to summarize or to emphasize, except that today we listened to the results from each country, and also we kind of get some advice from the consumer group, from the kind of the group that promotes eco-friendly agriculture, and also from the government side, and from the group who promotes free but the pesticide-free agricultural products to the school meal program, and also we listen to the problems of farmers who have to deal with pesticide still at the field, and so on. So it's a very complicated and long story, and I don't feel I have anything kind of to add, except just one. One thing I also like to kind of say is I try to monitor the interpretation, and some of the kind of is difficult to translate from English to Korean, or from Korean to English. And I hope that after this today, we can make some kind of written note from the actual discussions, so that we can understand more clearly about what has been said and what is the kind of content with that. But okay, here I titled my talk as "One More Step to Save Agriculture," and I would like to begin with a case report from Boston, which was published in one of the journal, the New England Journal of Medicine. And this report was from last year, 2021. And a physician, emergency physician, came to a girl, a very small black girl, and the mother clutches her daughter as the nebulized albuterol permeates the young girl's airways. Albuterol, I don't know whether you know, is an inhaler used to treat asthma. And the mother said, "I have done everything the doctors have asked, and she just keeps getting worse. What am I missing?" So the physician later, while chatting, reviewed in greater depth the patient's extensive records. Far too many for someone so young. Her care team have all been following the evidence-based guidelines. So what are we missing? Asks the doctor. And the doctor soon recognized that exposures to air pollution, ground level ozone, and pollen are key secondary diagnoses that may be pertinent to her patients. So she looked up her home address, and suddenly she was ashamed of missing an additional diagnosis, a layer below these exposures, the environmental racism. Suddenly, the albuterol and corticosteroid treatments feel like Band-Aid on a blood wound. And she kind of described some kind of other remedies that might help the patients. And so when the physician encountered a small girl with asthma, she diagnosed the environmental racism for her disease. So can we also diagnose the environmental injustice for our cases, for our kind of farmers and their children at the field? Because based on our work, we still kind of find some banned, but still used highly toxic chemicals. The closer to the source of the spray, we found that the higher the urine level. And was found even among the children who are not supposed to be at work. So can we then diagnose environmental injustice for the problems of children, family members, consumers, and also for the farmers? Probably we should. We should be able to do that. But usually it's very difficult. Very difficult. Why? Why? Well, to make a diagnosis, we often require two conditions. One is we can designate the cause of the problem. We should be able to designate the cause of the problem. But also, we should be able to kind of suggest some alternative solutions for that problem. So just name calling it as an injustice doesn't make any sense if we don't have any remedies, or if we don't have any alternative solutions for that calling. So we need to kind of have know about underlying cause, such as persistent neglect of the enforcement system as an upstream background, or kind of the export of those banned substances, even under kind of the name of the trade. Or and also the second one is we need to provide the potential solutions, such as the right to know the contents as an alternative. We heard about the double standard. Well, we heard about the hypocrisy of the EU, or kind of I sometimes I call it contradictions, but there are many excuses for having this kind of problem at the field, and these are four very common excuse for dog bite. Let's say it's a kind of products toxicity. So when you have a dog bite, the owner of the dog usually provides some excuse, and these are some of them. And I call it kind of hypocrisy or some, but anyhow, let's just make it short for this time's sake. And to overcome these excuses, we need to indicate that these are hypocritical excuses, and also we need to indicate some alternatives based on rights, kind of based on the proper, the asking of the proper solutions. And usually these are the excuses, and these are the kind of the rights that are openly recommended in a kind of international kind of standard as the free political rights for data, and employers' duty of safe work by information, and health rights for all as a knowledge, and so on. But the rights doesn't make it rightful unless it is properly asked. And so these are, to me, as a kind of summary, and even the right to know, the right to kind of have the data has some level, has some, as an information level, it just be a kind of material safety data sheet as kind of information sheet. But that doesn't make it kind of make it, I mean, doesn't satisfy the right to know. The sheet itself doesn't make you to know by yourself. There can be some trade secrets, and actually in the hospital setting, the right to know is often called informed consent. It's kind of very different. Right to know, informed consent is you should be informed to give your consent. So it's a way of right to know. It's a way of right to know, but it's kind of reversed way of right to know. So even the right to know can be at different levels. So considering that, I think today we heard some other kind of stories or kind of examples from other side, and so we could learn from each other some potential alternatives, and I think the change can only start here by questioning what are we missing from our kind of current situations, and trying to answer that, I think will make the change for all of us. Thank you.
We have just finished the last discussion. Now, this is the time where we're supposed to finish today's conference. I guess we can take a little bit more time. So if you had any questions about today's conference, or if you have any suggestions, I guess we can hear your comments. Any questions or comments?
I am Ram Charitra Shah from Center for Public Health and Environmental Development, CGFED, Nepal. Thank you for organizing such a wonderful conference. All the paper was very educative for me and hopefully all of the participants. The one question, there was repeated a statement that 40% of the organic food produced goes to the school, preschool, free lunch or free breakfast, something. I wonder if the parent is polluted, the baby is already pre-polluted, born. So my question is, how, or is there any program to make the parents safe to produce unpolluted baby that doesn't need organically produced food to be fed, to make the future generation safe? So that is my question.
So I don't think this is the question for the presenters, but I assume that the free meals to school, on top of that, we have a lot of education available for food safety, and also the civic organizations, the consumers, I mean the parents, they purchase, they get the education, and then there are many campaigns to encourage the parents to buy and consume safe food for their children.
Can I try to respond to Ram? I think the question here is we want to protect the children. So it's better to not feed them with food that is full of pesticides or, other chemicals. So I like the idea of the school lunches for the children and being organic. I think that's amazing. And I wish I could, replicate this for the rest of Asia. That'll be wonderful. But you're right in the sense that we should also work to protect the parents. And that's where we need to move. Not only, we have a lot of issues, but pesticides, I think the organic agriculture, agroecology, other methods of food production that does not use pesticides, heavy synthetic fertilizers, and all the other damaging chemicals would be important to eliminate. So I would suggest that that's the kind of the long term, but in the short term, these school lunches are important. Let's not, ever question them, because I think that's very a good starting point. And also we know that a lot of other chemicals are also in the environment. So it's not just pesticides, it's plastics, and all the other endocrine disrupting chemicals. So we have a big job to do. So yeah, just wanted to respond.
I think the question of Ram is, children are getting organic food in school under their government's program, but somehow they are getting food at home which may be not that organic, plus parents are getting food they are eating and being organic pesticide. These can be passed from mother to children in fetus. So in that question was, it was not a question on this program, but the thing how to safeguard at home as well. Yeah, means it's like government should promote and people should get educated and use organic products at home as well.
No, I think dimension to be discussed with reference to that. Protecting children is definitely very crucial, but the whole life cycle should be addressed. Until and unless we reach whole life cycle system approach, we may be not getting success towards our goal. That is the main.
Yes, as we discussed, shift to organic food, that's our long-term assignment or homework. So if you are talking about the free, eco-friendly organic food, free meals in Korea, so there should be some attempts in other Asian countries to do the same.
It's not a question, but a rejoinder maybe for Ram's question, and as what mentioned, because the way I understood the question is how she interpreted it. Because in the Philippines, we also have maybe not the free lunch, but we have a gulayan sa paaralan, which means vegetable garden at schools. And with this vegetable garden, we teach children how to plant them, and also with cultural knowledge on how to make it more organic. And with their harvest, they also cook it and eat it in schools. But our question more is on, yes, we teach our children to plant and to make it more organic, but when they go home, they eat products with which contains, pesticides and all those chemicals. So how do we safeguard our children? So what we are trying to do in the city, as far as we are concerned, is we try to lobby to the government to, increase the organic agriculture practice and provide more, support to organic farmers in order to increase the number of organic farmers in the city. Because if we don't support organic farmers, then we cannot really provide organic products that really need, that should be in the market if we want to eradicate pesticide use in these kinds of produce. So I think apart from doing that was an excellent an excellent initiative. We really wanted to replicate that in our country. However, listening earlier, I said well, technically we have the same work there in the Philippines. So why not also expand it in other areas as well? Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
네, 저럼 서로의 경험을
Do you have any comments or questions?
I'm Chalani from CEJ. This is more of a technical question. Actually, I was wondering when we were talking about the PPEs. Now, in Sri Lanka, the pesticide company themselves come and promote these PPEs, but they are made of non-woven material, that nylon one. Whether I just wanted to confirm whether it really is efficient and effective, because the one I have seen in this one is more like polythene. That non-woven one gets wet, so I wonder whether it's a good PPE material.
Yes, so cotton mask, because of its physical chemical property, it absorbs pesticide quite well. As we confirmed, as Mr. Lee mentioned, when you spray pesticide, wearing cotton mask is not recommendable. So rather than non-woven, the mask material, all non-woven material should not be the material for mask. So 3M types of industrial dust mask, that's what we recommend. So I think the material of that mask is, yes, please continue.
To add to his explanation, the kind of medical mask or surgical mask is to protect patients, not doctors. You know, surgical mask is to protect the exhaled breath going out directly to the patient. I mean, so it's not for inhaling. It's not for to protect the inhaling. And the way the insecticide or the pesticide work is by contact or penetration into the skin. So if the insecticide works by contact, the textile gauze, textile mask will get wet, and the contact time will increase a lot after wetting. So that's very dangerous. And for penetrative insecticide, that's also very dangerous, because if you have contact with wetted gauze, the penetration will goes up. Like if you wear the shoes, the boots, non-permeable boots, but incorrectly applied, so that the trousers were kind of wrapped inside, not outside of the boots, then the insecticide will go into the boots and make it wet, and penetration shoots up. So depending on the mechanism of the pesticide, having the wetted mask is more dangerous.
A pest control mask, the one that I use in Korea, there are two types. Well, in principle, organic solvent preventing cartilage, including mask, is the one that you should use. That's the pesticide sprayer's mask that's recommended. But in reality, if you do physical activity wearing that mask, it's very difficult to breathe. So this may not be 100% mask, but there's also a temporary mask, separate one. It has two functions. One is anti-humidity. It's non-water permeable. And inside the mask, it includes some charcoal. So that will absorb organic solvent. So it has these two functions. So we have this temporary mask. So that one, we refer to that as a pesticide spraying mask. So whether made with non-woven material or made with plastic, that one we don't call it pesticide spraying mask in Korea.
Pesticide-induced suicide. The reason why we do have a lesser number of that is that the pesticide is not visible, and then there is a good management of the pesticide. That's the reason. But I heard that so we use the low pesticide, so that is washed away very easily by water, and then even if you consume it, it doesn't kill the life. So I heard that. So I don't know if that fact that I just gathered was true. So toxicity, if it is highly toxic or lowly toxic, it is toxic anyway. But I don't know. The fact that I gathered was grounded. I mean that low pesticide. Does that make sense? In Korea, the biggest contributor to the pesticide suicide is Gramoxone. That's a brand. And the ingredient is paraquat dichloride. I think that is the ingredient. That's fatal to human health. If you drink a drop, you can kill yourself. And the farmers, they know that. So everybody knows that if you want to take yourself, then that is the brand that you have to buy. But it was banned for use and banned for sale in 2012 or 2013, I guess. And for the next 3-4 years, the farmers, they used it behind the scenes. And then by around 2016 or 2017, the brand disappeared and the suicide from pesticide has dropped dramatically. So we guess that banning of the product, and there was a study what was the impact of the banning of the product, and it contributed to the reduction of 57% of the suicide reduction because of the ban of the pesticide. So I think banning the product was very contributable to the reduction of the suicide. This is the official wrapping of the conference today. This conference on safe agriculture, Safe Asia, the project. So we shared the achievement of the project. So I wrap up the conference. Thank you, your attention and your participation. Thank you, everyone.